From the field to the film room to the war room, the road to the draft sadly comes to a conclusion today on the BGN Draft Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome into the BGN Draft Show. This is our draft recap. I have already been on the feed on the EPA podcast reacting to the Eagles draft, but I felt like we would be remiss as a BGN Draft Show that spent all offseason going through position by position, arguing about these guys. One of my guys, by the way, Dibes, got selected by the Eagles, and we'll talk about that. But I felt like we had to hop back on this feed and let you guys react to the Eagles draft, break it down. We spent a lot of time breaking down these prospects. That's what we're going to do today. I'm going to play a little more of a host role than normal, asking questions, setting you guys up here. So I'm joined, as always, by Dibes. My guy is Tanner McKee. Follow him on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Dibes, how are you doing this evening?
I see where this podcast is going. You're putting me in the corner, Shane. I kind of like it. Let's do it. Thanks for having me on, man. What a home run weekend for the Philadelphia Eagles. We're gonna get into it.
All right, and also joined, as always, by my co-host on Chalk Talk. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. Mark, how are you feeling this afternoon?
I'm doing well. They got one of your almost guys. They got one of your guys that was just left off. Keely Ringo almost was a Shane's guy. I think I probably ruined it by being a bit too high on him for him to be a full-on Shane guy there. But yeah, absolute home run. Not just in the draft, but there was a trade that happened during the draft that we're going to talk about as well a little bit that kind of ties into the haul that the Eagles brought in. I mean, yeah, Howie's gonna Howie.
All right, so let's dive into it. We're going to walk through the Eagles draft, talk about the prospects, the fits, and then briefly at the end, we're going to talk about the other three division teams and sort of what they did, give our brief reactions to that. Mark and I think Dibes is going to join us. We'll have a longer podcast breaking down all the NFC drafts on Chalk Talk's feed later this week. So if you guys are interested in teams outside the NFC East, we're going to do that tonight. AFC teams next week, and you guys can check that out. But here we're going to keep it pretty Eagles and NFC East centric. And let's start off at the top of the draft. Obviously, Jalen Carter was linked to the Eagles a lot. Questions of where he would go in the draft. Would he make it past the Seahawks at 5, the Lions at 6? And would the Eagles trade up for him? And they did. Not maybe as far as people would have thought, only giving up a future 4th-round pick to move up one spot with the Chicago Bears and select Jalen Carter. Mark, I'm going to throw it to you first. What was your initial reaction to the Jalen Carter trade up, and how are you feeling about it a few days removed?
You guys saw it. We were streaming the draft together, and we were all absolutely pumped about the move that the Eagles made, giving up very little to move up one pick to get the guy that we wanted all along. I mean, there was a couple guys that we all wanted, but he was in the top 4 for all of us from an Eagles big board perspective. And for you guys, I think he was either 1 or 2, but he was 3 or 4 for me. And he's an absolute home run in terms of the on the field product that Jalen Carter is. It's shocking that he fell to where he fell. It's shocking that a team let us move up above them to take him, especially a team that was last in sacks last year, decided to move off of that pick just for a 4th-round pick. I don't know why these GMs continue to accept Howie Roseman's phone call. Just block it, guys. Like, you don't have to pick up the phone. I will say that this is funny. I reached out to you guys on our group chat back a couple months ago because Sean Brace, my boss at the radio station, had a scoop because he met Brian Brzee, and Brian Brzee told him that Jalen Carter was in town with Brian Brzee together at the Eagles facility for a pre-draft workout. And Sean Brace gave that information. He asked if I'd want to report it, but he gave it to Victor Williams, and Victor Williams reported it. And then that was how we found out Jalen Carter was here. And I remember messaging with you guys that night. I was like, man, if they could get Jalen Carter, like, can you imagine? Like, and we all kind of were like, oh, they're just doing their due diligence. I'm sure, like, they're making sure maybe they'd move up to get him. And eventually they did move up that one pick to get him. but you didn't move up, obviously, the way that we were talking about. The rumors of the day of the draft that we were going to move up to number 3, and then we were going to move up to number 4 or 5. And everyone thought that was for Jalen Carter or maybe Will Anderson. Turned out all we needed to give up was a 4th-round pick in a draft that we have how many extra picks next year, Shane and Dobbs?
So many.
Yeah,
I think they're at 11 or 12.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dives, I should have thrown it to you first because Jalen Carter was the number 1 guy on your board. He was 2 for me. He was 5 for Mark.
Disrespectful.
So, yeah, Mark was being disrespectful. That's going to be a theme as we go through the Eagles picks here. But Dives, Jalen Carter, what's his fit with the Eagles? You know, how big of an impact is he going to make in year 1?
Never wavered, guys. Never wavered. How many times did we have these podcasts where you're like, should he be still your number 1 prospect? He was. I never wavered from him. And I think, you know, I expect him to be an instant contributor for the Eagles defense. I think he has the quickness, the technical prowess to really be that penetrating interior defensive lineman and even fronts. I think he's going to really take advantage of that space eaten up by Jordan Davis. I expect him to really, from the jump, be an instant impact guy. And you look at his upper body strength, you look at his anchor, you look at his awareness. He can be a 2-gap lineman. He has the versatility and disruptiveness to be kind of that elite chess piece for this Eagles defense moving forward. I'm going to say that a lot, chess piece, because there's a lot of defensive players that I think have elite versatility, and Jalen Carter is on the top of that list. When you look at a healthy rotation of a Jordan Davis, a Milton Williams, a Jalen Carter, a Fletcher Cox, man, that whole interior defensive line is going to be fresh. They're going to be ready to go. I expect Carter to see somewhere around like 35 to 40% of defensive snaps in year 1, potentially defensive rookie of the year. Why? He's got a lightning quick first step, super strong hands, 47 quarterback pressures and 6 sacks the last 2 years. This guy is the blue chip prospect right alongside Will Anderson in this draft. And when you look at it, like even before this draft, as we said on this podcast, who are the guys that could get early snaps from the jump? It was Bijan and it was Jalen Carter. The Eagles nailed it with this selection.
All right. Yeah. A lot of praise for the Eagles to get Jalen Carter at pick 9, but they weren't done. Nolan Smith at pick 30, a guy that was linked to the Eagles at 10 off and on. He was number 16 on my board and Dibes' board. He was number 29 on Mark's board. So Dibes, I'm going to kick it to you first here. You were a little higher on Smith than Mark was. How stoked were you for him to fall to 30? And how do you think he fits in with the Eagles' plans this season?
Yeah, if you were watching us during our watch party, I predicted him to go to 10. Not necessarily at 10, maybe a slight trade back. But I thought all the signs were there for the Eagles and Nolan Smith. It made a billion sense for the Eagles to bring this guy in. He's an athlete. He's not more so production. He's more so projection. He's got really intriguing numbers. Personally, the run defense numbers in college, I think they're a little fake, and I might get some heat about that. I think everyone who's acting like Nolan Smith's weight is not a concern, at least from the jump in the NFL, is kidding themselves. I think this guy is small. I think he's light. I think he's going to struggle against powerful offensive linemen at the next level. I don't think that means he's going to be a bad player by any means. I think he's going to lose reps. That's okay. I expect Smith to be an impact player from the jump in different situations, mostly because of his versatility and his continuing development as a pass rusher. I hope, this Eagles new defensive coordinator kind of puts him in situations to succeed. I think overall, Nolan Smith is in a great situation because he's going to be along an Eagles defensive line where he's never going to get chipped. He's never going to get doubled in his first year or two just because of how many studs are on this line. I think you're going to see him mostly as an edge defender in 5-man fronts, kind of that movable off-ball linebacker in 4-man fronts. It's going to be interesting. I'm interested to see how he does in coverage too, because He's got some talent there as well. So overall, I really want to see the Eagles get super creative with Nolan Smith on the football field. And with that athletic profile, he's got a real chance to succeed.
All right. Yeah, I think you're going to see – I don't think you're going to see Nolan Smith with his hand in the dirt a lot. I think you're going to see him as a stand-up edge rusher. I'm really interested to see like the 3-3-5 fronts that the Eagles would run, but with Hassan Reddick and Nolan Smith as two of the linebackers up on the line. So essentially making it like a 5-1 front where you can drop both guys, you could rush both guys. I think there could be a lot of creative things that you can do out of that package. So I'll be interested to see what his usage is like. Now, Mark, you were a little lower on Nolan Smith, especially with concerns about his development as a pass rusher, specifically, and his weight as well. Talk a little bit about your concerns with Smith and ultimately how you felt about taking him at 30.
Well, I'm higher on him than the rest of the NFL is because I had him 29 and he went 30. So all my Nolan Smith negativity was mainly based out of a stance where we were picking at 10, and he was never a top 10 pick in this draft. And I know that he became a buzzy top 10, top 15 pick. And there's been a lot of talk about Nolan Smith falling to the Eagles. Myles Murphy went 2 picks before him. Like, I don't think Nolan Smith fell. I think he went right around the correct spot because if he hits, he's going to be a very good pass rusher. The reason you're taking him is because he's basically DeAndre Hopkins lined up as a defensive end, like a more athletic DeAndre Hopkins lined up as a defensive end. He's a project. Like, this is a guy who you're taking him for the chance that his athleticism is so next level and his traits carry him to a spot where his speed is so elite around the edge that this guy becomes a 10+ sack guy. And Dibes put it in a great way. He's going to look as good as he possibly can on this Eagles defense with the talent that's around him. So he absolutely landed in the best spot. He might not have went 10. He might not have went, I know people were talking about, I think the Patriots at 14, I think Green Bay, people were talking about him at 13, the Jets at 15. He might not have went in that top 15, but I think it ended up best case for him to go at 30, next to Jalen Carter, next to Jordan Davis, next to Fletcher Cox, on the other side of Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, whoever he is on the other side of. He's going to look as good as he can possibly look, and I completely understand the home run swing. My concerns with it, and it's not like I didn't like the pick. I think he was number 6 or 7 best available for me at the time they picked it. So at 30, that's pretty good. I mean, that's pretty good value when you're getting a guy that I have ranked in my top 29. But the reason that I'm not as high on it is because it is a little bit of a Super Bowl window, and I don't think this guy's filling much more than the Robert Quinn role from last year. I think we're going to talk about a guy who's in between 15 to 25%. I think it's an extreme projection to expect him to defend the run right away. Like, I think this guy's a situational pass rusher right now. And if you are talking yourself in on Nolan Smith, and if you love Nolan Smith, I think that should be because you look at him and you see the elite upside as a pass rusher. I don't think it should be for any other reason than that. I think that's what he got picked for. And for that reason, I'm fine with the home run swing.
All right. So that takes us to the end of day one, and everybody's feeling great about the Eagles day one. You head into day two, and they've got picks at 62 and 66. And so obviously they trade back from 62 to 65 and picked up a couple of late picks, which we expected to trade back at some point. I never expected the Eagles to make those selections at 65 and 66 back to back, but they did, taking offensive tackle Tyler Steen from Alabama at 65 and then safety Sidney Brown from Illinois at 66. So Tyler Steen is not a guy that we talked about on our previews leading up to the draft. He wasn't in our top 10 linemen when we did those. Overall on our big boards, he was number 98 for Mark, so just cracked the top 100. He was 160 for Dibes, 112 for me. So, Mark, you were the highest on Steen out of all of us. I'll throw it to you here first. How did you feel about that pick? Should we just never doubt Jeff Stoutland on day two? Is it just irrelevant at this point?
You should definitely not doubt Jeff Stoutland on day two. And I think this guy is a guy they view as someone that has right away playability as a backup at versatile positions. He played for a long time at the best program in college sports at Alabama on the offensive line.
One clarification: he actually only played the 1 year at Alabama. He transferred in from Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
that was all. Yeah, that was all garbled up on his note stuff when it first came out. But so he was originally at Vanderbilt, and then he played his senior year at Alabama. But other than that, go ahead.
I have my notes kind of messed up here too. He did it in the SEC, is what I have here. But then once I saw Alabama, I extrapolated. But he did, because I didn't think he's transferred from one SEC school to another. I kind of forgot that Vanderbilt, they barely count as an SEC school, but they're playing against SEC schools, so he's blocking SEC talent, even if he's blocking for crappy players. But I think Tyler Steen having that ability to play in Nick Saban's offense, to play for Alabama, Stoutland's familiarity with Alabama. I highly doubt that Stoutland's not very much involved with the selection of Tyler Steen, with his ties to Alabama and his ties to Nick Saban. And how he put Stoutland right on the phone when they drafted Tyler Steen. And a lot of people think that he's going to be a guard at the next level, and that's fine. I think it's interesting that he played tackle at Alabama and that we think he's going to be a guard. I know that he's got short arms, but maybe that means he's got some versatility as a backup, which is one of the best things that you can have as a backup. So I've kind of talked myself all the way in on this pick.
All right, water gun to your head. Tyler Steen or Cam Jurgens? Who's the starting right guard week 1?
Oh, Jurgens, I think. I mean, I imagine that the year jump in Stoutland University would have to help Cam Jurgens. And I think we talked about this. I don't know if it was on Chalk Talk or if it was on one of the draft shows. I'm not sure. But I think we've talked about the fact that I think the people out there that didn't think Cam Jurgens was going to start at guard for the Eagles were crazy. Like, did we really think that we were just burning a second-round pick alive last year? Like, Tyler Steen, I think, is a future pick and a backup pick for right now at multiple positions. But I'd be shocked if and I think it's concerning if Cam Jurgens is not the starter.
All right. Dives, anything you want to add to that on Tyler Steen before we move on to Sidney Brown?
Yeah, it's definitely the answer is Cam Jurgens, but this is a guy that kind of went under the radar in my draft content. That's not a knock on Tyler Steen. It just happens. I covered probably like over 200 prospects throughout this process, and Tyler Steen just wasn't one of them. But I think this guy, when I kind of watched a lot of tape after the draft during that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, like this guy has great anchor, really good strength, really quick feet. He tested well at the combine, 79th percentile in the short shuttle, 81st percentile in the broad jump, 67th percentile vertical jump. He does have short arms, 9th percentile. But Jeff Stoutland has earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to identifying and developing offensive linemen. That's what this is. You look at Eagles offensive linemen, other than Jason Kelce, they're all homegrown under Stoutland University. But Jason Kelce has worked with Stoutland for over a decade, I think. So it's interesting. Each time you look at the Eagles getting an offensive lineman, you think, how Howie just thinks a year or two ahead. That when they took Landon Dickerson, you look at Brandon Brooks in his last year in 2021. You look at Cam Jurgens potentially replacing Jason Kelce. Here is potentially the same scenario. So I think Tyler Steen probably replaces Cam Jurgens in a couple years. So you now have more depth on the Eagles offensive line. That is never a bad thing. We can't expect the Eagles to be as healthy as they were in 2022. There's definitely a universe where Tyler Steen upsets Cam Jurgens, though. I don't think that's too crazy given his size and pedigree and history at Alabama and playing at the highest level of competition. That's definitely on the table. So I think I was like a B on draft night. I give it a B plus after draft night. I'm good with this selection.
All right. Yeah, he's somebody that I overlooked as well. But as soon as the Eagles picked him, I was like, well, he's probably good because I just trust Jeff Stoutland and went to go. I watched some of Brandon Thorne's stuff and watched a couple of games, and I'm all on board now as well. So Then the Eagles made the very next pick at pick 66, and they took Sidney Brown, safety out of Illinois, who I had 45th on my board. Dibes, you had him 48th. Mark had him at 59. So, Dibes, I'll throw to you first here. Tell me about Sidney Brown, and chess piece, I think, is the word you used earlier. I assume we're about to hear that again.
Yeah, just as Jalen Carter was a chess piece for the new Eagles defense, so is Sidney Brown. This is arguably the most versatile safety prospect in the draft. He's the Eagles' highest drafted safety by the Eagles in 10 plus years. You got to think that's for a reason. Negotiations fell through with CJ Gardner-Johnson this offseason. They brought in Terrell Edmonds, but that doesn't mean like they're nearly set at all at that position. Sidney Brown is a guy who's physical at the stem, has extraordinary balance, great short area quickness. At Illinois, which had a terrific secondary, he was the leader of that defense. You look at Devin Witherspoon. It wasn't Witherspoon who was calling the plays for that defense. It was Sidney frickin' Brown. This is a guy who can play at multiple levels, can play within multiple schemes. He can do a little bit of everything really, really well. Again, his positional versatility is awesome. Over the last 2 seasons, he's played primarily as a box safety, but he can match up with tight ends. He can play in the slot. He can play deep safety. You look at Brian Branch as like safety one. That guy was primarily a slot guy. I think Sidney Brown is a real safety that could really be a heat seeker on this Eagles defense. But more importantly than not, I think he's going to be an elite special teams player from the jump. I think that's going to be his bread and butter in 2023. I don't know if he's going to start. There's a lot to kind of weigh in and see. I probably was having a few too many Tito's on our watch party say he's starting. Pump the brakes just a tad. But I when you talk about chess pieces, this is one of them. I think he's going to be a core special teams player from the jump, and B, definite real starting potential for the Eagles moving forward.
All right. Mark, do you agree with that assessment? Is Sidney Brown going to get on the field much this year? Do you think he's a special teamer? What do you see his role being in 2023?
It's just hard to know with what Desai. We don't have much history with Desai to know what he wants to do there. And there's another player that they drafted that could play a role here. I think Shane thinks could play a role here in this discussion. I will get to that in a minute. So I think that this pick kind of combos with another pick to have a larger conversation about the secondary. But I love the pick. I love the swing at a safety, and I love the other pick that we're going to talk about in the secondary as well. Mark Ross from the NFL Network compared Sidney Brown to Brian Dawkins. So he did the media tour on all the radio stations. Yeah, I don't necessarily see that comp, but I did think that was funny. Ray Didinger, it was one of Ray Didinger's 5 my guys in the draft. So I thought that was relevant to throw out there as well. So Sidney Brown, I'm definitely in on the pick. I wasn't quite as high on him as you guys were in the rankings, but I had him 59. I still had him higher than we picked him, and he was probably, in terms of the positions we needed, one of the higher players I had ranked available.
And if you follow me on Twitter, and if you have just followed any of my content, I have been raving about Sidney Brown for months. And I think one of the highlights of the draft party was when I learned that Shane was higher on Sidney Brown than I was, and I freaked out. I was like, no, that's impossible. And it thus became one of Shane's my guys, and I was really devastated.
Yeah, I was like that with Julius Brents with Mark. I feel like I was raving about Julius Brents for months, and then when we put our final big board together, Mark had him higher than me, and I just felt cheated. So I'm sorry that I did that to you, Dives, but you shouldn't have disrespected Sidney Brown. So now let's go to the 4th round. The Eagles didn't have a pick until the 6th round, but they made the trade up into the 4th round to get a guy that I think it's safe to say we all thought was a great value, and Kelee Ringo, cornerback out of Georgia. I had him at 24. Mark had him at 33. Dibes had him at 38. So by far the best value pick relative to our big board. Actually, that's not true. The next guy technically would be the best value relative to our big boards, but we'll get into him in a minute. Kelee Ringo, though. Mark, I'll let you lead us off. You were a little higher on Ringo. When the Eagles traded up, he was sitting there going into day 3, and I was like, just trade up and go get him for the memes. Like, I mean, I think he's a great player, but let's just go ahead and rebuild that whole Georgia defense. And then when they moved up, I was like, no way it's about to be for Kelee Ringo, but it was. So your thoughts when the Eagles called Kelee Ringo's name?
I mean, the memes are incredible. Howie, he called Nolan Smith on the first day, and he said, it's killing me as a Florida Gator to pick all these Georgia Bulldogs. And Nolan Smith said, you want to win. And he said, I'm addicted to confetti. Georgia's seen confetti the last 2 years. And who was the quarterback of that secondary of the back-to-back national champions? Kelee Ringo. Kelee Ringo was absolutely supposed to be like a top 10 pick before this season. Had some trouble with double moves, had some trouble getting beat deep.
Oh, you just got muted, Mark.
That's cool. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. Kelee Ringo's got trouble with double moves. Mark's got trouble with his mic cable. You know, it's no big deal. No big deal. You've got safeties over the top here that got your back.
Yeah, exactly. This is an aside comment, but I've been doing these streams for Sixers games with Trilbro Dude, and every time that a big 3 gets hit or something, and I freak out and the mic gets unplugged, and I'm like, I'm just not talking I'm talking to myself for 30 seconds. Like, I need to do a better job with mic management. But Howie's doing a good job with draft management. What a segue. That's why they taught me that in radio school. But Howie moving up for the memes to go and get Kelee Ringo after all day on Friday night and all morning on Saturday. We're all saying, oh my God, can they get Kelee Ringo? Oh my God, like, are they going to get another Georgia player and a guy who fell way too far in the draft? Like, it's just poetic that they were able to move up and put them all on the same defense. And I think in this defense that we run, or at least ran last year, we're not asking corners to be up on the line. We're not putting corners in a lot of chances to get beat deep on double moves. So as long as you have over the top help for Ringo, or as long as he's going to be playing off the line enough, he should be a good outside cornerback, in my opinion. I'm a bit more bullish on his ability to actually play corner, but if he struggles with that, I know that there's people like Todd McShay or the true draft guru over there, Shane Half, that think Kelee Ringo's more of a safety, right?
Yeah. I think that there's some safety potential in Kelee Ringo. He struggles to play with his back to the ball. He struggles to get his head around, and he struggles through transitions. And safeties don't really have to go through those transitions where you're, going from that back pedal to turning and running. That's not something you ask safeties to do. Now, it's problematic if a safety gets beat by a double move, and so there's some things there. But, yeah, I definitely think there's some potential for Ringo as a safety. If corner doesn't work out, or if corner does work out, but the Eagles are just stacked there, I think that you could see him being used some, probably not in 2023 as a safety, but something that you could put away, file away for later. That's something that they could try to cross. The Eagles love safeties with cornerback experience, and that is Ringo. He hasn't played safety, but I think there's potential he could do that.
And we've seen injuries in the past. Like, it would be helpful if he's able to shift over there. If Blankenship goes down, Brown goes down, and they need a safety, maybe they would throw Ringo in. And we'll see. Maybe that's something they even, try him out a bit at in training camp and in practice.
They really should.
All right. And then we get to the 6th round, and Dibes, your guy, the guy you stood on the table for on the My Guys podcast, it was Tanner McKee, 50th on your big board. He went at 188. You had to be thrilled with this pick, right?
Let me just say, I was not the creator of the My Guys list.
No, the math was.
My Guys list was thrown onto me on the night of the podcast, and I just ran with it. So
the headline for this segment is that Dibes disagrees with math.
Yeah, Dives is anti-math.
All right, yeah, I've been on record 1,000 times, whether it was with Mark Schofield or on Chalk Talk or Party on Broad. Like, I'm not a fan of this quarterback class, and that includes Tanner McKee. Listen, he's a polished passer. He's got really good footwork, really good timing, really good accuracy. He's got great size, NFL caliber arm. You look at this guy, he's got a 27% sack conversion rate in 2022. That is not good, guys. He's got heavy feet. He's kind of an enigma given like Jalen Hurts, Marcus Mariota. Tanner McKee. He's the exact opposite of what they're trying to do here. This is the one pick where I really scratched my head. But listen, it really boils down to me being really upset because there was another quarterback in DTR that went like 10 to 20 picks before this, and I thought he would be a pitcher perfect fit with the Philadelphia Eagles. It really comes down to McKee and his ability to process. I think that's what stands out the most. And that is probably his bread and butter as a prospect. I think this guy has a knack for making good reads. He can read a defense. He can, get the ball out quickly, accurately, with anticipation. We'll see. When I think of like Tanner McKee offenses, it's not the Eagles. That's just I could be totally wrong on that. I think of an offense that's heavy play action, throwback, old school type of offense. But the Eagles offensive line is so good. Maybe he has success there. That's just my take. This is the only pick on draft weekend that I might have went a different direction.
All right, Mark, Dives had him at 50 and would have went another direction. You didn't have him in your top 100. Did you just hate this pick? Did you just not care because the first 2 days were so good? What are your thoughts on the Tanner McKee selection?
Yeah, I don't really care about day 3 picks when they're not guys I love. When they're guys I love, I'll brag about it, and it's a big deal. But if it's not a guy I know, it's like, yeah, it's day 3. At least I know who Tanner McKee is. Like, it's like they took a guy who most people had QB6. I think he stinks. But I think most of the quarterbacks stink outside of the top 4, and I think Hooker even stinks. So I think that, if you were going to take any of the quarterbacks, I guess him or DTR would have been the guy I would have taken. But I would have loved to have seen them take Zach Kuntz. I mean, I know you're big on that as well, Shane, but I had Zach Kuntz 60. Then he went in the 7th round. I do think he's going to make an impact on the Jets if they let him. They have signed like 1 million pass catchers, and nothing like Aaron Rodgers demanding his way out of Green Bay because he doesn't have any help, and then bringing all the receivers with him to New York. Very interesting move there by Aaron Rodgers. But I would like to see Zach Kuntz get some chances in the red zone with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. So that's a different podcast to talk about for the AFC podcast next week. But I would have liked to see Kuntz instead of Tanner McKee. And I know that we ended up going and signing a tight end today, Dan Arnold. But yeah, I wish that was Zach Kuntz.
Yeah, unfortunately, Zach Kuntz won't get a chance to make an impact as a rookie because he never played with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. So he will be sent off into the wilderness somewhere, a darkness retreat, maybe. For me, my biggest regret for the Eagles in the draft was not coming out with a pass catcher, whether that be a wide receiver 3 or a tight end 2. And so I'm not going to complain too much about a 6th round pick. He was in my top 100. It was at 188, but A.T. Perry was still on the board. Trey Palmer, Andre Yosevas, Zach Kuntz. Like, I would have rather seen you take a flyer on one of these pass catchers than on a statue quarterback that doesn't particularly fit your offense. But I won't quibble with it too much in the 6th round. It's really the only pick of the draft that I wasn't a fan of. So, and then the last one at 249, they took defensive lineman Moro Ojomo, which the BGN radio show has decided his nickname's going to be Mojo. So I like it. We're going to roll with it. Mojo at 249 wasn't on any of our boards, but have you guys had a chance to look into Ojomo, and what are your thoughts if so? Dives, I'll throw it to you first here.
He was on my personal defensive tackle ranking. He made my top 10. By the way, Mojo is a name of a sushi joint right across the street from me. It's literally my favorite sushi joint. The fact that his nickname is Mojo, I am 1,000% okay with that. But he's our NFL-ready run defender. He can get up and down the line of scrimmage super fast. He has really good build, low center of gravity at 6'2", but he has long arms, 34 plus inches. He earned the 4th highest run defense grade in the country in 2022 among defensive tackles, despite being under 300 freaking pounds. This is a well-coached dude, a polished dude. He's got experience playing defensive end. He's got a quick reaction time. He can shoot through gaps. He can create disruption. He's got good extension with his arms. He can locate the football. He does a really good job of kind of keeping his shoulders squared and going towards the play. I think Ojomo is a steal. I can't believe he was still on the board. Negative wise, he's definitely small for an interior defensive lineman. I think mostly he's going to win at the NFL level with his quickness. And I had a rounds 3 through 4 grade on Mojo, and I like this pick a lot. I mean, there's conversation about Mojo and a certain Dallas Cowboys first round selection in terms of what they offer in terms of run defense. So don't tell that to Skip Bayless. But for me, I thought this was a great selection.
All right, Mark, did you have any thoughts on Ojomo?
I saw PFF had him 93. I saw that there were people saying it was the best pick of the draft. Wow. With these day 3 picks, that's all I need. I need to see someone else was high on it. And I'm like, all right, someone sees the vision. But yeah, people think he's a really, really, really good run defender and probably not a pass rusher at the NFL. Not necessarily my favorite prospect usually, but it's a little different when it's the 7th round. So I think that changes things.
And we are back here on the BGN Draft Show. We've already reacted to the Eagles' killer draft class. Now we're going to briefly touch on each of the other division mates. And so let's start with the New York Giants. Let's save the Cowboys for last because that one's going to be fun. So we'll start off here with the Giants, who in the first round selected defensive back Deonte Banks out of Maryland. In the second round, interior offensive lineman John Michael Schmitz, one of Dibe's guys. In the third round, one of Mark's guys, Jalen Hyatt, wide receiver out of Tennessee. In the 5th round, Eric Gray from Oklahoma, which means he should have been one of my guys. 6th round, Trey Hawkins, cornerback. 7th round, Jordan Riley, defensive lineman. And then also in the 7th round, Javarius Owens, defensive back. So, Mark, I'll throw it to you here first. Obviously, you really love their Jalen Hyatt pick, him going all the way down at 73. But overall, what were your thoughts on the Giants draft class?
They filled their 3 biggest needs with 3 players that they drafted at good values. And I think that warrants an A. I gave them an A. They were my 6th favorite draft of the entire NFL. It's really frustrating that the Giants have a competent organization now. It was nice when they had Dave Gettleman for years, but it seems like Joe Schoen is doing a really, really good job there. Jalen Hyatt, definitely my favorite pick of the draft. It's a little disappointing to me as a Jalen Hyatt fan that he went to a team with Daniel Jones as the quarterback instead of a team like with Justin Herbert or, Jalen Hurts or Patrick Mahomes or someone that's good at football. That would have been nice to see because now I feel like he's definitely not going to live up to his full potential in that offense with Daniel Jones. But Dable should find creative ways to use him. The only problem is they have like 7 receivers. So I have no idea who's even going to play for the Giants necessarily on a weekly basis, but their 3 biggest needs were a speedy receiver. They needed a corner really bad. They went and got Deonte Banks, who has excellent upside due to his athleticism. Even if I probably had him a little bit too low in the 30s, but he went at 24. I had no problem with the pick whatsoever at the time. And John Michael Schmitz, I had him at 52. I think I was lowest on him, but he went at 57. So therefore, I think he's a pretty good value. He was definitely the best center on the board when they made the pick, and they needed a center. So I think that's a rock solid pick who will slot right in and be an impact starter right away. Whether I think he's going to be, I don't think he's ever going to be a top 5 to 7 center in the NFL, but I think he probably will be a top 20 center this year. And the Giants needed that. So I think those top 3 picks carry the day.
Yeah, I'm going to need you to stop trying to give Patrick Mahomes more weapons to work with here.
Yeah, that's fair.
Send Jalen Hyatt anywhere but Kansas City. I would rather him rot in New York than go to Kansas City. But
that's fair.
I thought the Giants had a great, which I guess, by the way, did we all give the Eagles an A+? I didn't even ask for the letter grades.
Yes.
But yeah, so we all gave the Eagles an A+. I also gave the Giants an A+. I thought they killed the draft. I loved each of their top 3 picks. I thought they were all great values. Deonte Banks is a perfect fit for the Wink Martindale defense. Like you said, 3 great picks that hit their 3 biggest areas of need. It's nice when good players at the positions you need fall to you. And I walk out of the draft, and the only thing that that I wish would have fallen differently for them, and it wasn't likely in this draft class, but is that they have so many tiny slot receivers already. And so they selected Jalen Hyatt. And it's not like, I mean, we knew going in that the majority of the receivers in this draft class were slot body types. But I do wish that they would have been, well, I don't wish, but if I'm a Giants fan, I wish that they would have been able to walk away with a bigger bodied pass catcher, whether that be a tight end or a wide receiver, just to give a little bit more variety. They've got the same archetype all over their receiver room, and I'm not sure that that's the way you want to go. But Jalen Hyatt was such good value there that you don't pass that up, especially needing a receiver. So I gave them an A+. Dibes, how would you grade the Giants draft haul?
I'm definitely a little bit lower than an A+. I think it's probably more so like a B or B+ range. Again, I agree, guys. Deonte Banks, John Michael Schmitz, Jalen Hyatt are all three very good prospects. Eric Gray is another good one. More of an elusive back, 5'10", guy that can make guys miss, change of direction kind of dude. He's not going to be a 3-down starter with his size and stuff, but really impressive start-stop ability, fluidity. He didn't make my top 10 running backs in this draft, but to get him in round 5, very good value. I'm not going to talk on Deonte Banks. By the way, you win, Shane. You called him a first-round pick. We were playing a game of which defensive back would make it in the first round. I was a little bit lower on Deonte, but you win, Shane. And John Michael Schmitz, that's my guy. He was one of my favorite prospects in this draft. Happy to see him go to the New York Giants. I'll probably get flamed for that. But I think that's a really good fit for him because he's super NFL ready. And I think he's got Pro Bowl upside. Did I have a top 20 grade on him? I might have been.
I think you did. Yeah, I can check here when we go.
So
Mark's
just like
his head, yes.
Thinking back to like the Giants draft of 2022, I loved Thibodeau. I loved Evan Neal, but the rest of the draft was kind of meh. You look at this Giants draft, rounds 1 through 5, it's really solid. I'll give it a B+.
All right, and you had John Michael Schmitz 17th on your board.
Love him, man. I think that dude is really good.
All right, let's pivot to the Washington Commanders draft class. In the first round, they selected cornerback Emmanuel Forbes. Second round, safety Jatavius Martin. In the third round, they took offensive lineman Ricky Stromberg. In the fourth round, offensive lineman Braden Daniels. In the fifth round, defensive end KJ Henry. In the sixth round, running back Chris Rodriguez. And in the seventh round, defensive end Andre Jones. Mark, I'll throw it to you again first here. What did you think overall of the Commanders draft? How would you grade it? The floor is yours. Tell me what you thought.
Yeah, I hated most of the draft here. It was my third. It was my third least favorite draft in the NFL. I gave them a D-. And by the way, it's kind of funny. Like, I think their best pick of their entire draft was their first pick with Emmanuel Forbes. And I think a lot of people would look at that and say that that's a reach. And even me, he went 16 overall. I don't have our rankings right in front of me. He would have been right around that. He would have been like 17 for me, something like that. So in terms of,
he was 19 for you.
Yeah. So even still, I was by far the highest on him among us three. Even still, there has been reports, I will say, that have made me feel a little better about that pick, where they made that pick. Apparently the Patriots really, really liked Forbes and were probably going to take him over Gonzalez at 17, which is pretty crazy. And then apparently the Ravens were obsessed with Forbes and may have even moved up for Forbes. So for the people out there who thought Washington may have reached there, or maybe you should move back and get Forbes, maybe the NFL was a little higher on Forbes than we think. Maybe the NFL is a little bit less worried about size at the corner position than we think. We thought Christian Gonzalez would be a guy who went in the top 8 to 10 picks because of the traits, because of the size, because of the things that he brought. Yet he ended up going behind Emmanuel Forbes, who was 160 pounds soaking wet. So it's interesting to see Washington, and it's interesting to see teams like New England and Baltimore apparently were very interested in an anomaly in terms of the cornerback position in his weight. So I love Emmanuel Forbes. I think he's going to be better than people think. I think he's going to be a playmaker and a guy who's pretty annoying for us to deal with for Washington. Other than that, I hate every single pick that they made, especially the next one in the second round, Jartavius Martin. You could have picked about 8 better DBs in that spot. You could have picked about 5 better safeties in that spot. You picked the wrong safety from Illinois in that spot, in my opinion. So I don't understand that pick. Apparently, he needs to start right away as well. And then also the next pick that they make, Ricky Stromberg, apparently he needs to start right away. And apparently Braden Daniels is going to be the backup at both tackle positions. Like, I don't know, man. I think this team might bottom out this year. Like, I think we're talking about like a 4 or 5 win team.
Yeah, I also hated the Commanders draft. I gave it a D+. I thought they botched the secondary. Like you said, they should have picked. I thought they should have picked Christian Gonzalez. I thought that's a no-brainer at 16.
I agree. Yeah,
and then at 47, like, I respect that they needed to invest in the secondary. They just took the wrong defensive backs, and they took one player that was in my top 100, and it was Emmanuel Forbes, who I thought they dramatically reached on. So I thought it was a pretty poor draft for the Commanders overall. Dives, what did you think about their draft?
But real quick, they should have taken Joey Porter Jr. over, in my opinion, because I had him CB1. But I would have rather had Joey Porter Jr. there.
Yeah. It's a collection of guys I really like. I'm not saying that they shouldn't been drafted where they are or should have been, but they're prospects that I've been covering pretty heavily throughout the draft process. You look at Ricky Stromberg. I think he's definitely an underrated prospect. He's played 100+ snaps at each interior position, since 2019. As a center, he's big, he's strong, he's mobile, he's smart. He gave up 0 sacks in 2022 and just 7 hurries. He doesn't have good arm length. He doesn't have good short area agility. But I had a day 2 grade on him. I think we're selling him short just a little bit.
Do you think he can start right away?
No. That's different. That's a different coverage.
Yeah.
But I do think he's a solid prospect. Braden Daniels, when I made my top most underrated prospects in the draft, Braden Daniels was my number 4 prospect on that video. By the way, Moro Ojomo was number 2. And when we're talking about day 3 guys, Daniels is, just 300 pounds, but very explosive, high football IQ. He's a solid, versatile offensive lineman that I think has really good upside. And then, KJ Henry, Chris Rodriguez Jr., those are 2 guys that, I think are definitely underrated as well. So I'll give this a solid C+. And Jartavius Martin, he is a guy, according to Mark Schofield, is the most underrated defensive back in this draft. Super athlete. We call there's a lot of defensive backs in this draft that we rave about their athleticism and things like that with lack of production. Why not Jartavius Martin? So I'll give it a C+.
All right, and that brings us to the last draft in the division. It's the Dallas Cowboys, who in the first round selected Mozzie Smith, defensive tackle. In the second round, tight end Luke Schoonmaker, both out of the University of Michigan. I think they saw the praise Howie got for going for Georgia, and they're like, hey, what if we drafted a whole bunch of players from the same team that's just not any good? So that's another way you could go. They took linebacker DeMarvin Overshown in the third round. A bunch of other guys that don't even matter. Deuce Vaughn in the 6th round. You can look up their drafted list if you want to read it all. But I reserve the right to lead us off on the Cowboys because I was on a roll on Twitter. So in the first round, they drafted a defensive tackle that averaged .016 sacks per game in his collegiate career. And you say he's a run stuffer. And I tell you, he averaged .2 tackles for loss per game in his collegiate career. In the second round, they took Luke Schoonmaker, a tight end who has 1 season with over 175 receiving yards and is 6 weeks younger than Jalen Hurts. And it's just all downhill from here. I thought the Cowboys had a terrible draft. And it's picture perfect reason why you don't walk into the draft with a glaring hole that has to be filled. Like, they had to take a defensive tackle and a tight end. Like, they had to. Those were their 2 biggest holes. And when the Bills leaped them for Dalton Kincaid, I think they panicked and they reached for Mazi Smith. The guy had a 3rd-round grade on, and then they were pigeonholed into tight end in the 2nd round, and they took Luke Schoonmaker, which I also thought was a big reach. So I thought the Cowboys draft was really bad, and it's more fun to make fun of than the Commanders draft. I think the Commanders draft was still worse. I gave the Cowboys a C- grade, but overall, I thought it was a pretty disastrous draft for the Cowboys. Dives, what did you think?
It was terrible. Holy cow. It is so bad. Mozzie Smith, man, he's a run defender. He's going to add depth to their defensive line. But in round 1, that's a massive mistake. Luke Schoonmaker was a huge reach. This is a guy that I think the Cowboys just fell in love with at the combine. His combine scores were outstanding. 9.75 RES score. That ranked 26 among over 1,000 ranked tight ends between 1987 and 2023. 6'7", a guy that is a special teams core player, special team player, a guy that is a good run blocker. So I just don't see it, especially in one of the deepest tight end drafts of all time. Schoonmaker was not it, man, especially in round 2. DeMarvion Overshown is an athlete, a guy that has real upside, but has major question marks. The guy that I really am interested in is Viliami Fehoko Jr. Here out of San Jose State. He's a guy that I had a day 3 grade on, and I'm really interested in, actually. 6'5", 263 pounds. He had the 4th most pressures in the country last season. Some of the best play strength in the class. Over the last 3 years, he's been one of the most dominant defensive linemen. Really good athlete, complete physical skill set. I think he's one of the underrated defensive linemen in this draft. So that's actually my favorite pick from the Dallas Cowboys. And he went round 4, which might have been a little bit of a reach, but terrible draft. I give it a D.
All right, Mark, lay it on me. Your thoughts about the Cowboys' disastrous draft class?
F-. It was my 2nd least favorite draft of the entire draft. They did not get one top 100 prospect for me. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of how low I was on Mazi Smith. I don't think that Mazi Smith is ever going to be an NFL pass rusher at any level whatsoever. So you're talking about a guy who is strictly a run stuffer. And like Shane said, we don't even know how good he is at that. So we're talking about 4 guys who I had. It's funny. They didn't get any of my top 100 guys, but they got 4 guys who are ranked between 100 and 115 for me. Smith, Schoonmaker, Overshown, and Fehoko all clocked in between 101 and 115. So I guess I'll say I like the Overshown and Fehoko picks. Like, they're fine. Even though Overshown went 90 and I had him 105 or whatever, something in that mix. The Luke Schoonmaker one is actually the one I hate the most, even though Mazi's taking a guy outside of my top 100 in the 1st round is technically the worst pick. But there were so many tight ends in this class, and you took one with like no upside, in my opinion, in Luke Schoonmaker for a team who's trying to compete right now and needed a tight end who could play a role in that offense right now. After losing Dalton Schultz, there were so many better options. I don't understand taking Schoonmaker there, and everyone wants to cry and go nuts about their, the father of scouting, whatever, Mr. Vaughn. You drafted your son, dude. This isn't like the Langhorne Athletic Association. You're supposed to be running an NFL team. You shouldn't draft your 5'3" son because it's a fun story. Sorry, he's a Nepo baby. It's nepotism at its finest there.
According to Skip Bayless, like, he's like the difference maker between the Cowboys being a better team than the Eagles in 2023. Go check
Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, I mapped out the average relative athletic score of all the draft picks that went in the draft. So I put this out on Twitter. You guys can go check it out. If you're listening on the audio version of the podcast, it's on the screen here if you're on YouTube. Just to give you an idea of where teams fell in terms of athleticism. And, there's the Jets are number 1, and Zach Kuntz with the 10.0 relative athletic score. Anthony Richardson with the 10.0 for Indianapolis makes them number 2. So there's some There's some problems with just using an average, but it gives you a nice snapshot. Overall, the Eagles ranked 6th in terms of average RAS score. Washington was 7th. The Giants were 19th, and Dallas was 30th. So just some fun stuff I charted out there. You guys can go check that out if you want to dig into it a little more. So that is going to about wrap it up here for us for the BGN draft show. I won't tell you that we will be back next week. I'll tell you that we will be back next year to cover the draft for you guys. It truly has been a pleasure to guide you guys through draft season. I hope you guys enjoyed these shows. If you did, please leave us 5-star ratings and reviews. Shout out the draft show in your comments for the iTunes reviews. That really helps us out, makes us feel good. I hope you guys enjoyed the content as much as we did putting it together and bringing it to you each and every week. So one last time before we get out of here, Dives, I'm going to throw it to you. Any final thoughts? Tell the people where they can find you. Plug your content that you've got coming on. The floor is yours.
Follow me on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. I do a silly podcast called Party on Broad, where it's mostly NFL draft, NBA drafts, Eagles and Sixers content. If you're watching this, first week of May, I'm already lining up 2024 NFL draft content, position rankings, big boards, you name it. So it's already in the works. By the way, the 2024, we say this every year, I feel like, but the 2024 NFL draft is going to be really fun as well. Complete opposite of 2023 when you're talking offensive players, skill position guys on offense. So that's going to be really fun. But man, it's been a blast. It's kind of sad to see this one ending, but the show continues, and I can't wait for 2024.
All right. And Mark, same thing for you. Tell the people where they can find you, plug your content, and any final words you want to leave here.
Yeah, you can find me at Mark Henry Jr. _ on Twitter. You can check out the Tough Cover Radio Show every Saturday, 11 to 1 on Fox Sports PHL The Gambler. Go follow that at Fox PHL Gambler. I've been doing these Sixer streams with Trilbo Dude on his playback. So check out my Twitter to see when I'm retweeting that. Those have been really fun. We have intelligent conversation for 3.5 quarters. And then when the end of the game is close, it just devolves into me cursing and yelling my face off. So if you want to go check that out, that's always fun. But my final thoughts, I have talked myself into this being a good draft, even though we spent all of these position previews talking about it not being one. But by the time it came around, it was pretty mainstream exciting. There were a lot of big moves that happened. There were 4 quarterbacks in the mix, Hooker even a little bit in the mix, even though not necessarily on draft day. Bijan, a big name running back, a deep tight end class, a bunch of receivers went off the board right in a row in the first round. It ended up being splashy. It ended up being a bit more fun than I think we anticipated at the beginning of the process. And maybe that's just me talking myself into guys that I had to talk about a lot for a couple months. But I do think that we're going to look back and think maybe we were a bit too negative on this draft going into it. Maybe there are really a lot of good players coming out of it.
Yeah, I have a take. Every year, everybody always says, next year's draft is better. Mm-hmm. And then by the time we get to next year's draft and people have actually watched the tape on those people and found the flaws, then we start saying, this draft class, it's not very good. But next year's class is better. And it's a cycle that I've seen repeat itself time and time again. Now, there's definitely strengths and weaknesses at positions in drafts. And, generally there can be a little bit of up and down drafts. But I think we take that hyperbole a little far sometimes.
I'm going on record right now. Yes, the defensive end position in 2023 is better than 2024, but you're going to see a deeper defensive back class in 2024. You're going to obviously have more elite talent at tight end, wide receiver. Safety is really strong this year, I think. And what am I missing? Offensive line, the top-notch talent at offensive line in 2024 is going to be really fun. So just to kind of pump up 2024. I'm right there with you, Shane. I'm right there with you. Who knows what I'm saying at this point next year?
Yeah, somebody clip that out and sit on it for a year and come back to us when it's about draft weekend next year and we've been talking about these positions, we'll see how spot on Dives was. So thank you guys for joining us for all of these BGN draft shows. I hope you enjoyed them. I'm going to sign off with a different ending tonight than usual, but I think it's very appropriate. We're going to sign off with a Go Bulldogs.